I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to your Innovation Grants, Technology, Commerce, and Trade Committee. I am joined by my colleagues, Mr. Bonner and Mr. Krikorian. Mr. Buscaino is on his way, and Ms. Martinez will not be joining us today. Unless there is an objection from my colleagues, I'd like to move items number 4 and items 6 through 10 on consent. Seeing no objection? Okay, then that will be the order. Are there any cards on those items?
No, Mr. Chair.
Great. Now, I was asked to take item 3 out of order, which I'm happy to do, but I would do that normally, except that Mr. Buscaino usually likes to be here for the port issues. So I'm going to start going sequentially until he gets here, and then I'll take up item 3. So again, I want to honor the request to take that up quickly, but I want to also respect Mr. Buscaino, give him a chance. So why don't we start with item number 1. We could ask Ted Ross to come forward. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 1?
Item number 1 is a report from the Information Technology Agency relative to how data analytics and predictive analytics can be used to benefit the city.
Are there any cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Great. Okay. Mr. Ross.
Excellent. Good afternoon. The term smart city is often used to describe the use of technology to improve the quality of life of residents, businesses, and visitors. There's certainly various investments one can make to make a city smarter. You can invest in mobile apps and online services. You can invest in sensors and connected devices. You can invest in internet connectivity like CityLink LA. But there's certainly one investment that is relatively low cost and by definition makes a city smarter, and that's data analysis. Through data analysis, modern data science techniques are applied to city challenges to gain insight, to draw conclusions, to inform policymaking, and even make predictions as to what's going to happen. City Council saw this in 2013, taking the momentum of open data that had been happening in the city. They said, let's not just open up data, but let's go ahead and analyze data to improve the way we run our city operations and to identify opportunities. And what we ended up with is we ended up with some data analysis pilots that were recommended by council. And to do a data analysis project, you really need 3 things. You need a challenge, you need data, and you need data scientists. For the challenge, this one had to do with specifically, and what's written in the report, it was related to Vision Zero. It was related to pedestrian and cyclist collisions with automobiles. In a nutshell, cars hitting people in streets and hitting people on bicycles. We took 5 years of data from LADOT, LAPD, the state, and other sources, and then we used data scientists in partnership with the USC Marshall School, the Department of Data Sciences and Operations. As a city, we don't have a robust data science classification or robust data science capabilities, so we used a local university that had a very robust program for that. And the objectives were really quite clear. It was to determine the factors and anomalies in patterns of pedestrian and cyclist collisions with automobiles in the city of LA. It was to provide LADOT with data to assist and expedite traffic engineering modifications. It was to provide insight into high-risk corridors and intersections for pedestrians and cyclists. It was to provide LAPD with data to maximize the impact of traffic safety and enforcement zones. It was a semester-long project. The USC committed 23 graduate-level students with 3 professors towards that effort. They broke them into 5 teams. We provided a great structure around it where we used DOT and LAPD staff to provide input and subject matter expertise so the students knew and got a better understanding of the data and the different fields that were involved. We provided briefings and milestones to make sure that we could provide input and feedback that they were on the right track and what they were coming up with. The result was quite impressive from a city perspective. We had 5 teams, each of which providing presentations where they identified collision factors, the days of the week, the days of the month, the types of vehicles, the types of drivers, collision causes, times of day, seasons, you name the topic. They identified by location with heat maps and various types of visualizations. They provide recommendations, some of which folks like Department of Transportation were familiar with, some of which were new input based on their background and their use of different data science techniques. This was actually something that caught such attention, we actually won a Best of California award for Best Data Analytics and Business Intelligence. I'm not one for props, but I felt the need to bring it. Of course, it's a little light, so it would be quite hard for you to see it. The compelling use cases of the City of LA are really limitless. They're really endless. We've already done a project that also just concluded around workers' compensation fraud, in which we partnered, unlike before where we partnered with Department of Transportation and Los Angeles Police Department, and we took the input from Krikorian's office and Weston's office and Blumenfield's office. This was a partnership with Controller's office and personnel to attack a different problem, but to use some of the very same modern data science techniques. They uncovered all sorts of interesting information, things I found interesting. For the fire department, one of the most common causes of workers' compensation has to do with injuries to knees, legs, and ankles. One of the student teams recommended that a better investment in LAPD boots could potentially reduce workers' compensation costs substantially. There were many other types of input and feedback. We're creating partnerships for additional data analysis projects with USC, Cal State Los Angeles, LACC, and other universities. And we're also looking to develop internal resources. If I could walk away conveying one message, it is, of course, the importance, and that's something that has been clearly stated by various council offices and the mayor's office, is for us to step up to the year 2016, to step up into modern data science capabilities, to take city problems and city challenges and to be smarter on how we address them. We feel partnerships are not just one valuable way to approach it, but building up internal resources is another. And we've actually worked, there's no funding ask in this report. At this point, we actually worked with CAO and Mayor's office to reprogram some existing budget, a nominal amount, to be able to bring in an on-premise resource, to continue partnerships with local universities, and to pay for some basic licenses associated with data analytics such as Tableau, R, other types of use cloud services, et cetera, to load the data. And I'm certainly open for any questions or any input from the council members.
Great. Well, this is great stuff. You know, potential savings of the city, tremendous amount of money. We're sort of trying to move toward that futuristic world from Minority Report with the precogs and pre-crime and figuring out what happens before it happens. We're not quite at that level yet.
Not quite at that level.
But this is sort of the start of trying to use this information, and I think it has tremendous potential. What are the initial startup costs? I know you said it's very minor, but what are we talking about?
So we're investing around $150,000 in the sense that we're going to be leveraging some of it for university partnerships in which you get a large number of students to participate for a semester at a relatively low cost. Also, it would give us the ability to bring in part-time a contractor who would be able to come on board and be able to provide this as a citywide service where we take various use cases, approach them in maybe a 1 to 2 month type of program. We would look to our elected officials. This is certainly not just this isn't just an ITA effort, far from it. We're simply facilitating something. We need input from our elected officials as to what are those meaty use cases, what is being discussed. This Vision Zero conversation came from Matt Hale in Councilman Krikorian's office. It was very quickly seconded by Justin Wesson and by people in Blumenfield's office. And so it requires that kind of input to understand what are the meaty topics and the meaty problems challenging Angelenos today. And then, of course, it requires those departments who are business owners, they're SMEs, subject matter experts in those areas, to provide insight and understanding. We required personnel to be a very close partner to explain workers' compensation. How does the process work? What does the data look like? So the data scientists can apply their methods and their mechanisms to it. So we see it very much as that triangle of use case, getting the data, and having the data scientist. So with nominal investment, we're seeing results. Certainly with a larger investment, we'd see more results.
Obviously, it's going to be critically important to track the results and the metrics of what happens so that when we are asked to make future investments in this, we have the evidence to back it up.
Yep.
Mr. Krikorian, your motion, you want to?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Ross, for very optimistic report. This is, good news, and I think anytime you start a program with an idea prompted by Matt Hale and you use 23 USC graduate students, I know you're on the right track.
You'll have results. You'll have results.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's so. As I think many of us had hoped and expected, it obviously is proving to be a tremendous success, and the use of city academia partnership like this is an enormous force multiplier that I hope, all of our general managers will be examining opportunities to take advantage of this too. With the intellectual capital that we have in this city, to not take advantage of that, I think would be sinful. And for you, what you've demonstrated is the ability to really do things in an exceptionally cost-effective way.
We have
great talent.
We have excellent city employees, and I'll be the first to say it, but there's so many great capabilities in those universities who are learning the very types of capabilities that we often don't have.
And those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
You need great city employees, but you also need to give them the support and help of lots of smart worker bees who can take this on as well. And I think it's just been an exceptional experiment. The one thing I would ask is that the Vision Zero part of this is discussed at some length in your report. We haven't really gotten much feedback in terms of, I think to the chairman's point, that having actual benchmarks for here's some suggested policy areas that you believe this kind of data analytics would be most suited to, number one. Number two, what kind of returns on investment we could be realizing. And three, although I very much appreciate and respect that you've been able to do this without augmenting your budget, I think if we demonstrate the return on investment, I think most of us would be very eager to make that investment and to expand this kind of program significantly, but we need to kind of have a blueprint for how to get there, and I think I would look to you to prepare that blueprint. So if you could come back to this committee with that kind of if that's all right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that that you come back with a further report delving into greater detail about each of these policy areas that are specified in the motion and others that you think would be appropriate, with some real meat on the bones in terms of what kind of staffing would be required, what kind of additional resources would be required, and then I would expect that would also be considered by the Budget and Finance Committee at some point as well.
Absolutely.
Colleagues, any additional questions? So, to honor your request there, I was going to note and file it, but I guess we should continue it and ask for this additional information.
Be my pleasure. Be my pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Without objection, that's the order. And then, per the request, we'll move to item number 3 next.
And council member, prior to item number 3, would you like to reconsider the consent items now that Councilmember Buscaino is here?
I'll give him a chance to vote on them.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, sure, sounds good. If we could, without objection, we'll reconsider items 4 and items 6 through 10. Seeing no objection, they're open for reconsideration. Moving these items on consent. Seeing no objection, they're moved on consent, with Mr. Buscaino present and accounted for. Moving on to item number 3. Mr. Prespa, will you first read item number 3 into the record?
Item number 3 is a report from the Board of Harbor Commissioners relative to 9 permit amendments to establish rental improvement set-aside accounts for 9 marina operators located in the East Basin, Cerritos Channel in the Wilmington Marinas.
And are there any public comment cards?
No, Mr. Chair.
On this item? Okay, great. We have Mr. Galvin. Go ahead.
Yeah. Mike Galvin, Director of Real Estate for the waterfront and commercial areas of the Port of Los Angeles. The item in front of you is an item to amend 9 permits in the East Cerritos Channel for the Wilmington Marinas. It's an area that was developed in the port in between the 1930s and 1950s. Most recently, these tenants entered into longer-term permits with the port from 1995 through 2025, but at this point have come into a state of disrepair due to lack of a long-term land use plan there. And so the port is working on that long-term land use plan, but in the interim, we have provided a rental sharing amount with the tenants to allow them to reinvest in their facilities there in the port, which will allow them to increase the revenue streams coming through and will be essentially beneficial to the port in the end of the day, because the improvements that will be returned to the port will be in an improved nature at the end of the term of the lease.
Yeah, Alvin Newman, CAO's office. We have a technical correction, the CAO's fiscal impact statement. Number one, we do concur with the assessment by the port, and we agree with the recommendation. But the technical correction in the CAO's fiscal impact statement, the 25% rent reduction credit will be approximately $250,000 annually for all the 9 marinas, and we had mistakenly put in for each one of the marine tenants. So we wanted to make that technical correction.
That it's a cumulative amount, not a individual.
Yeah, it's a combined or cumulative amount.
Okay, so we'll be happy to, when we pass the item, to make that technical correction. Question on how it works, though. So each group puts in 25% into this fund. It's a very creative way to do some reinvestment, some redevelopment, especially without having the CRAs. Do they then have access just to the money that they set aside, or is it a pool of money that all the different marinas have set aside that they apply to and could conceivably get more than they actually put in?
No, it only relates to them individually. So each tenant would have access to 25% of the rent they would normally have paid, but just for that tenant.
And they would have access to it. So if someone doesn't take advantage of it, or they take advantage of only a portion of it, then the remainder stays in that account?
The remainder would go back to the port as rent.
Will go back as rent. So it's
Yes.
basically sort of an earmarked amount that they can do up to that amount in refurbishing.
Correct, or more, but it's just not reimbursable.
Right, I can always.
And that's what we're hoping for, is that this spurs further investment by the tenants.
Great. And are there other cities, I mean, it sounds like a great idea. Are there other cities that have taken advantage of this to positive effect?
In different ways, and so coupled with this, there's a compensation reset that's going forward right now with the same marinas that has readjusted their rent in line with really their economic performance capability as opposed to a straight land and water rent. And a similar process was undertook in the city of San Diego and the Port of San Diego, actually, back in the 1990s, where they did both of these. They reset their rent based on economic performance methodology, and they also just reduced their percentage rent completely. So they went from percentage rents from 25 to 20% down to 15%. And so we're essentially doing the same thing, but we're creating this credit amount that if it's not used, it would go back to us. Essentially, they just created a rental amount reduction for a period of time and then eventually raised their rents back up when everything corrected itself. So very similar, just a little bit different on the methodology.
Great. Colleagues, Buscaino, question on this?
Move the item. Thank you for working on this comprehensive approach that works not only for the port but also the tenants there at the Wilmington Marinas. Really appreciate your efforts. And looking forward to Thursday's Harbor Commission meeting.
So are we. It's being signed right now.
The agenda is public?
The agenda's public. The item will be posted this evening.
Okay, looking forward to that item.
Being signed as we speak.
Sorry, nothing to do with this item before us.
It's all good. Any other questions, colleagues?
Move the item.
All right, and I want to recognize we have former council member Rudy Savornich here in the audience. Savornich, hello.
Thanks so much.
Former council president pro tempore.
Even more accurate and better. Thank you. We're glad to have you with us. So, without objection, it will be moved, including the technical correction that was asked for by the CEO. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us back to item number 2.
Item number 2 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to Amendment Number 1 of the contract with Wave Technology Solutions Group for document management professional services using Documentum.
And are there any cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
No cards. Great. Thank you.
Claudia Aguilar with the CAO's office. Before you is a contract amendment for Wave Technology Solutions Group for Documentum Professional Services. This amendment would extend the contract by a 2.5-year term and add $3 million to the contract total compensation amount. The original contract was executed in 2013, but as we have a number of ongoing projects, we recommend that we extend the contract for 2.5 years to allow departments to complete this work. This contract is actually used by a number of departments for a number of document management services, including LAPD, fire, finance, and ITA. So we recommend 2.5 years, and at that point, ITA will go out for an RFP to procure additional vendors for this service. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, and Laura Ito is here from the department as well for any specific questions.
Great, thank you. This is sort of an odd one in the sense that it's not really a contract directly, it's a capacity, right? Because departments have to apply to do this regardless and basically let their own contract.
Correct. This is just providing the contract authority. It doesn't commit the city to spending $3 million on this with WAVE.
So why have the cap? I mean, we started with a $1 million cap, which maybe you explain why we so grossly underestimated, I guess, what it would require. But then the next question that comes to mind is, well, why did we underestimate it? But then why did we even bother estimating it? Why have a cap at all? If the agencies have to go through a process that has to be approved in order to take advantage of this?
I believe the controller requires that there be a defined contract authority so that this contract can be set up in FMS. The original contract, we did a competitive RFP process and were intended to award multiple contracts. However, because of a prolonged contract negotiation process and the inability of one of the contractors selected to agree to the city's terms and conditions, we ended up with one vendor who could agree to maintain the pricing that they had submitted their bid at, as well as agree to all the city's terms. So we could have looked at increasing the ceiling for that one contractor, but we just weren't sure whether there was going to be the high demand for the service and whether this contractor was going to work out. They were new to the city. It's turned out that they have served us well. There's greater use than it had been anticipated, although that really has just been in the last year. The first 2 years of the contract, we had very little usage, but we are now at the full $1 million maximum in awarded authority.
And who actually pays the contractor? Is it the departments or does it go through ITA?
Each department encumbers and pays their own bills. So, and of the $1 million, about $800,000 has been used by LAPD or is in the process of being used by LAPD.
So they don't actually go through ITA at all, other than just the fact that you set up the committee.
They come to ITA to get approval to use our contract, and we're really reviewing it for conformance with the scope of the contract. But the actual accounting process is done directly by departments.
Great. Colleagues, any questions or comments on this item? Nope. Pretty straightforward. Thank you very much. Without objection, I'd like to approve this item.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've done 1, 2, 3, and we'll move to item number 4.
I believe we're on item number 5.
Yeah, we're on item 5. We did 4 on consent. Item number 5, correct. Thank you.
Item number 5 is a report from the Board of Airport Commissioners relative to the First Amendment with Turner Construction Company to complete and close out the Tom Bradley International Terminal 4 connector and checked baggage inspection system building project at Los Angeles International Airport.
And this is an item, colleagues, that in many cases would be on consent, but it was discussed by the Board of Airport Commissioners prior to its approval. They highlighted a few issues, follow through on the commitment for disadvantaged business enterprises as subcontractors. I think it's a good thing for us to move forward on, but I think we have a duty to hear it and to see what those issues were and to have that discussion. So please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Guidry, Deputy Executive Director at Los Angeles World Airports. The item before you is for a contract extension for Turner Construction. They have been on this particular project, the Tom Bradley T4 Connector project, for the last 3 years. They have already opened up a portion of that project. We look at next week as a full opening of several of the major components of the project. As far as the quality of the work and the project to date, as far as the systems and the improvements, that part was going very well. However, there has been an issue on the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and Turner's ability to meet what they pledged at the contract award. At the contract award, they pledged a participation of 15%. And as in the report to you all, to date, they have reported a 2.23%. It did become an issue at our Board of Airport Commission meeting. Turner did get up and speak about their improvements and what their plan is moving forward. And Lawa also talked about some of the issues that we see in making sure contractors complete, perform, and do the DBE requirements, as well as other business enterprise requirements on contracts. Since that time, there has been a couple of things that we have done, LAWA has done. We have created a position and a team, if you will, of a business enterprise procurement team, review team for planning and development. That's the group that I reside over, as well as our procurement services division has also instituted a greater effort in looking at the percentages of not just this contract, but all of our contracts moving forward and their compliance with the enterprise program. I do know that Turner is here today and have asked to speak as well on some of the things that they would like to do.
We're happy to hear from them. So at what point during the contract did LAWA discover that the thresholds for DBE weren't being met?
Although we were getting monthly different reports, I would say that LAWA did not look at the percentages in detail, and when probably about 6 or 7 months ago is when we saw that the percentages were way low than what we anticipated and what we thought. Turner Construction did go out and do different solicitations, but they did not receive the participation they thought they would receive, and we as well were not looking as closely as we should have been on a monthly basis. So that's why since then we have decided we need to really pay attention and look at these monthly participations and see what these contracts are doing.
And what do you think the reason is for not, that it has been difficult to get to that net percentage?
Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of Turner, but I will speak from what I've learned in, as far as managing this to date, is that with the packages, the type of packages this is, it's a guaranteed maximum price. LAWA negotiates on a design build contract, negotiates the price ahead of time with the contractor, and then they go out and do the specific bids. And at that time, they were issuing to the lowest and responsive bidder. However, some of those bids did not come in with a high DBE percentage. So say, for instance, if they do they solicit a bid from different subcontractors, the amount in the dollar that is given to them does not have the full or high participation on the DBE program.
Is that a matter of weighting the DBE participation higher in the subcontract selection process?
No, it's a matter of really, as we're going through and them soliciting different bids and different packages, being able to really go out into the community and see where are the trades, what are the interests, what are the things that the DBEs are saying or communicating back. And I believe, with Turner, they've tried to make different changes and improvements moving forward. They have multiple contracts with the airport, and they're doing much better on those other contracts, but they're recognizing as they're out there with those contracting communities, seeing what the issues and concerns are.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the report, and I want to thank LAWA for taking some ownership of this. I understand that at BOAC, you identified that LAWA's oversight could have been better and that you've created this new position. Is that new position in place yet?
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay,
Yes.
great. All right.
Yes.
So in a situation like this where there were the monthly reports that we probably could have flagged earlier, that position will now be taking ownership of that responsibility?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that Turner has other contracts with the airport. What are those?
Yes, they do have the Midfield Satellite Concourse contract with us, as well as some other terminal-wide improvements. Those are under a different program, an SBE and a MEB-WEB. They are meeting their requirements on those contracts, okay. well above.
So clearly the 2.2% is unacceptable, and I want to try to figure out why it is what it is. The threshold, the sort of net worth threshold, is 1.3 million for the businesses, correct?
They
can't
I don't know for sure.
They
for
can't
the
be over
threshold is
that,
the 1 million,
right? So that means that they can't have a ton of money coming in. What are the requirements that we put on them for doing business at the airport that might have costs that might make the delta between those costs and the income difficult
Well, I'll definitely start. I think some of the issues that we're seeing is, for one, for the smaller businesses, they are having a hard time with the insurance requirements, all the different requirements that we have in working at an airport. Certainly, the cost of doing business with LA World Airports is different if you're working on the airfield or you're doing different things that require airside access, which is a $10 million insurance requirement.
Is that a requirement that the airport imposes, or is that an FAA requirement?
The airport and our risk and city attorney teams have opined on that is the amount that we need for insurance purposes, just in an event that there is any type of incursion with aircraft or any issues like that.
So we may have a requirement that makes it extremely difficult for a company that's DBE to...
For the small businesses, that has been one of the issues that have been raised that we're hearing.
Well, I think it would behoove the airport to look at, to talk to a number of the businesses that have gotten contracts, a number of those that have been approached and didn't, find out what some of the impediments are, because that sounds like it could be one. I don't know how much flexibility there might be to come up with something to make it a little bit easier. I've also heard issue that LAWA's long payment turnaround time makes it difficult for DBEs to participate because they don't have as much cash to play with and hold on for us to do it. What are we doing to make that happen faster?
That is certainly has been an issue raised. One of the key things that the airport is doing is when we're making sure our contractors and consultants are submitting their payments and their invoices on time and that they're complete and that their quality control before they actually submit it to us is intact. The other piece on our part is to be proactive in reviewing those and making sure that we have prompt payment to them and recognizing and flagging any issues. We do that, but there have been other cases where that payment has been longer than anticipated. But that is one of the key issues where where we can help is to make sure that as we're reviewing those invoices, if there's any flags or any issues, raising them up as early as possible so that provides the primes an opportunity to make the correction, and that way that they can be paid as well as subsequently paid to their subcontractors.
Could you find out for us what the average turnaround time is, and then maybe 6 months from now, let us know how that's changed?
Sure.
That would be useful. Thanks. I also understand the airport's trying to do more to create more opportunities for small businesses, and the board is moving forward with a mandatory local small business enterprise.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can't speak fully for procurement division, but I will just say that is definitely one of the initiatives that the airport is really pushing forward. It is a local preference or a local business preference for our contracts. So we do want to provide greater opportunity for not just small, but also local businesses as well. And so we're incorporating those requirements in upcoming procurement. So things that have happened in the past are in the past, but as far as moving forward, we're definitely looking at what other inclusion provisions that we can provide in our contracts, and small, local is one of them.
I look forward to hearing more about it. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Corey?
Thank you. Mr. Bunnan was very gentle. I feel less ability to be so because in the construction industry more than probably any other industry, good intentions mean nothing. A building stands or it does not stand. People who are very smart about figuring out how to make things work, make big infrastructure projects work. And I just find it outrageous and entirely inexcusable to come seeking an $80-some million contract to say, well, we'd like to get to 15%, and then to get to less than 3%. It's outrageous and inexcusable, in my view. I am sick to death of hearing public infrastructure contractors say, well, we made a great effort, but there just weren't enough good contractors out there, or we couldn't get people to respond to our bids, or, it was not cost effective to get them in. I'm sick of it. If a goal is set, I expect that goal to be met. And I know Turner is here. I hope that I'm being as clear as I can be. And I would like to actually ask, because the report indicates that despite this colossal failure, the department determined that the contractor has made a good faith effort to meet the goal. Based on what? How do you come up 13% short on a 15% goal? How does the department find that they made even a good faith effort? Based on what facts? No, that's not I'm not being facetious. I'm actually asking you that question. Upon what basis did the department determine that Turner had made a good faith effort to meet the goal?
The good faith identified in the report, the good faith effort is at the time of the bid. So when they responded to the RFP or B that went out to the industry, they responded and they have pledged and they did the good faith effort requirement per the contract requirements at that time, per the procurement requirements at that time. Since then, you are absolutely correct as far as them falling extremely short of what they pledged as a good faith effort at the time of the award. So that's where there's a difference. At the time of the award, yes, they pledged 15%. They met all the requirements, but since then they have not achieved what they submitted.
I mean, I get that this is not a contractual mandate per se, but I got to tell you, when these big international contractors come before, whether it's here, whether it's the port, whether it's Metro, whether it's the city of Los Angeles or others, and put up a number and then don't even come close to meeting that number, I really feel like there's a bait and switch involved. And I've just had it with it. So I want to make that really clear. And then in terms of the making it easier, and Mr. Bonin, I think, raised some really good points about how do we take away those excuses of, well, it's too hard for small businesses, it's too hard for minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, disadvantages businesses to participate in this because of obstacles. Okay, one of them was insurance. Is there some reason that LAWA's policy couldn't be to mandate that the prime secure insurance and then incur the expense of naming the subs as additional insureds?
That's one of the things, and that's one of the things we're trying to do is really understand from the smaller businesses what are the issues. I mentioned insurance is one of them, and we're looking at what type of ways that we can either provide programs or education or different things that we can do as an airport as well as the contractors in moving forward. But I did want to speak to something that you mentioned briefly, which is moving forward in the penalties and the teeth that we have in future procurements. This DBE particular program was done 3 years ago, and it did not have enough teeth. Moving forward, there is a new federally kind of race and gender-based DBE requirement, as well as with our SBE programs. There will be teeth in those programs that we did not have before, and that's one of the hurdles in really coming back to these contractors and saying you must meet these different requirements because we didn't have teeth in these programs. And so today and moving forward, we do have those.
Thank you.
It's one of the things we're talking about in the Jobs Committee and getting a report back generally on how we're doing on these programs and how we're doing at the airport and how we're doing at the port is part of that discussion. This is an extension of a contract that we really don't have much choice on. We're just about there, and we want to get this done. You did say that if folks from Turner wanted to speak out, I'm happy to entertain that. If you wanted to, that's not required, but. Please come forward, and I'll consider it as part of the presentation and not public comment. So it's not on the time.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Dow. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Turner, responsible for our operations in LA, and I'm joined by our full-time Business Outreach Director and Community Affairs Director, Michelle Ballard. Just a few points I'd like to clarify is this is really important to us. I mean, we're a company that spends over $1 billion a year in outreach business enterprises, minority women, small and disadvantaged. So it's very important to our culture. That's why we have full-time people like Michelle on our staff. The anomaly at T4 is really, it was a DBE program. It was originally bid as a minority and women-owned program, so there was a change during the bid process. But I want to take responsibility for, as Turner's issue here is also that we underestimated what it would take to get 15% qualified just in DBE alone because of the insurance requirements and some of the contractual requirements working on the air side. It is quite difficult. However, if you take into account what we've been able to achieve with LAWA's help on the minority disadvantaged, minority women, small and disadvantaged business on T4, we're over 12% committed and engaged in contracts on that project. However, we're only...
Explain the difference again.
Well, we're only measured on DBE, and that's why we're reporting on DBE today. And I am embarrassed about the results and hold responsibility for that. But if you take into account what we've been able to achieve on a total business outreach, we're over 12%. But the contract pledge at the time, right, wrong, or indifferent, was only for disadvantaged business. As Ms. Guidry pointed out, we have other contracts there. We have a contract over $1 billion with our joint venture partner, PCL. And we're tracking and will be over 15% on small business. So each program is different. Midfield Satellite Terminal is a small business outreach program. We will achieve 15% or better. So that's $150 million of outreach. And similar, not quite as big, the other project that Lawa mentioned that's under contract to Turner is the Central Terminal project. And that project is over $200 million, and that's a minority and women business outreach program. And we have over 15% engaged and forecasted to be under contract for that project. So we are doing quite well, but we're not...
And that one is minority business, but it's not the disadvantaged.
It's not the disadvantage. So where we really dropped the ball and underestimated our pledge was on the disadvantage. So we've learned a lot from that. I think LAWA's learned a lot from that, and we can work together to make sure we're never here again reporting on such a low percentage for disadvantaged business.
And the disadvantage has to have both, be under a certain threshold and be minority women owned.
Yes.
And then it has to have the net capital, working capital or net worth of 1.3 million or less.
Right.
And with the stringent insurance requirements and the expertise it takes to work on the air side, it doesn't, come up with the right answer. And so we have to work extra hard on that. And we'll be much more prepared to do that in the future.
Great.
Michelle, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, and I just want to add, I understand, and as I spoke before to that I understand the messaging. I'm a constituent. I live in Los Angeles. So I understand the messaging that you all have to do to the community. That if you put out $1 million worth of work, that 15% of that work, you want it to go to small business. So we understand that. So that being said, we look at, and I've talked to Cynthia Guidry about this and the LAWA group, that going forward, we're going to work together to make sure that the message is correct, that if the project is a certain type of project, then you have this certain percentage of participation. So it's not, you look at it per project, per the work. So it's not a wand of a certain percentage on every project. Even at Turner, we're doing that. We have a corporate goal of 20% for minority and women business. However, we're realizing that won't work if we're doing a Wilshire Grand downtown, where in minority and women businesses it's $1 billion project. For our own corporate goal, 20% might not be the real answer. So we're looking at per project, per the work, what are the requirements, and it's not just a wave your wand. So, and the federal government works the same way. So we're just kind of all looking at it and working together on it.
Mr. Corcoran?
Can I ask just a specific question then on that? I appreciate the clarification from Turner, but we talked about insurance. What has your experience taught you about other specific things that we can do on the city side or on the airport side to ensure that we take away those barriers to entry for, particularly for the small businesses, but for all DBEs? What are the other things that you're finding other than insurance to be an inhibiting factor to participate?
So just to explain in that difference of DBE and MBE, and MBE and WBE, women-owned business, minority business, can be any size. We understand that. They can do the big work. But when you have the goal, DBE in particular, as we said, the $1.3 million of personal net worth, the $10 million policy might cost that.
Right.
And that's on air side. Again, on land side, that is not the requirement. However, at Turner, we have, the contract controlled insurance program where we bond insurance companies under us. Yes, we do help in that way. So that is some way to look. But again, as Cynthia brought up, that we will be looking at the insurance side of it going forward to make sure that, if those airside, those limits, which are brought down by FAA or whoever it is, LAWA and Homeland Security, that we can work something out where, if as you said, taking on bringing them on under us as the additional insured, that's bringing on liability for small businesses, we'd have to look at that. When we're talking to LAWA about those things, right? All the contractors are talking to LAWA about those things right now.
Yeah, and on the insurance, I just got to believe that's a solvable problem on the policy side, that we can, working with our primes, we can figure out cost-effective solutions that will break down that barrier. But are there things that you have experienced other than the insurance issue? Are there other inhibiting factors that are barriers to entry for the small business?
I would say that, right now we're in the construction industry is very busy. And it's hard to get 3 bids out of contractors if they can go to a private contractor and get paid on time. Honestly, they're going to go there. They're just not going to bid the work. That's been one of that's truly, I talked to all my counterparts at Clark and all the other big construction companies, Metro, and that's one of the things we noticed, that our base of contractors bidding certain work is shrinking because they're going where it's easier for them to work.
And
honestly,
that might go hand in hand with certified payroll. On the public side, you have to have the certified payroll. So what we're trying to do is get more small businesses on the LPC tracker, which is instead of a manual-based certified payroll, we can help them be more automated, because that's a big drain on their overhead, which they don't have, right? Because they're a small business. And then our SubGuard program is a Turner-provided bonding capacity program, which also helps some of the smaller businesses enter into our SubGuard and not have to provide 100% payment and performance bond on their own. So those are the 3 areas I think we can help.
Thank you.
Without objection, thank you very much. Without objection, we will approve the recommendation.